Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's show, lots to break down. Of course, the ongoing saga of Anderson Silva will be talked about on this week's show. Also, continuing with our theme here, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, there was that controversial eye poke with Francisco Rivera and his loss to Uriah Faber. Talk a little bit about that. Of course, there were 3 MMA fights this past weekend. World Series of Fighting, Bellator, and the UFC all had fights this weekend, so we'll talk about this weekend's MMA action. And to end off the show, we're going to pick the fights for the main card of UFC Bigfoot versus Mir down in Brazil this Sunday night on Fox Sports 1. As I said, I am Jim Gramm. He is the Juice, Dave Sadler. And how's it going, Dave?
Stall for time, Jim. Stall for time. I'm trying to be funny. Hold on a second.
All right, well, I want to bring up a couple of things. One.
Okay. Oh, you got 6 seconds. Go ahead.
Well, I got nothing in 6 seconds then. All right, let's hear your introduction for this week, Dave.
I'm waiting for a Red Bull commercial to finish. You guys notice my new hat? It's not new, but it's my hat.
Showed up in boots, ruined your black.
That's right. You know what that was?
Yes, I know what that was.
What was that? Tell us.
Garth Brooks.
And why am I playing Garth Brooks on an MMA-related podcast?
Because you're about to go see him in concert. Again.
And where am I going to go see him in concert?
In the greatest city in the world, Detroit, Michigan.
Part of that sentence was true.
I'm kidding. Yes, it is in Detroit, though.
Yep. So I'm pretty excited for that, going up there Saturday. Then I get to come home Sunday and watch the fights, so that'll be cool. And they'll be live on Sunday, so that's it's good. Yeah, just been working, and it's cold here. I'm sure it's cold there. And, I need to start a segment, a grinding my gears segment. I know that we're going to talk about Anderson, and we could probably use this as a segue, but I'm getting real sick and tired of this drug talk all the time.
It's really started off 2015 hot and heavy, PEDs, and the UFC, in fact, just as we're about ending our show, so we're taking this into consideration for all our listeners here, at 1 Eastern, about an hour from now, the UFC will do a press conference about PEDs. So we're going to end it just in time so everyone can catch that and check out what the UFC top brass has to say about all this failed drug tests going on. So we're going to try to keep it tight with that in mind, and then obviously come next week's show, we'll be able to kind of digest what happened and hear the fallout and all that. But that's we'll see if I don't know if anything groundbreaking will be said, if anything groundbreaking will be done, but the UFC at least is having a press conference. I don't I guess that's something. I feel like if they're having a press conference, Dave, I feel like something is going to be said that's meaningful. I highly doubt it's just a press conference to answer questions about failed tests. They can do that at any press conference. They didn't need to hold a special event to do that. So right. I'm thinking something of note has to be said at this press conference.
Well, let's play. Let's play. What's that guy on Johnny Carson? Karnak, where he tries to tell the future. Tell me if these are options. Random testing of every fighter on the roster.
Yes.
I'll answer my own question. It's possible, it's feasible, it's expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are all correct. Because you either, one, have to then have the fighters flying to Las Vegas to do this random test test, or two, wherever state and or country the fighter lives in, they then have to contact the nearest facility that could process said sample, and it also has to be a good and accredited facility. So then the UFC has to come up with a list of, I don't know, 50 to 100, maybe more, depending on, all the states and countries fighters live in, which are these days quite numerous. So then they have to basically make like a network of different labs, and obviously with that many labs, that many more samples could be, I hate to say tainted, but more stuff happens when it's different facilities all trying to work together instead of just one facility handling everything.
Right. What I'm curious about is in this press conference, and I'm sure if it's like crazy news, we'll probably throw together another little episode. I hope that it's not like, okay, starting today, anybody who is caught with a banned substance is banned from making any money with the UFC for a 2-year period or something drastic. To me, I think there needs to be some sort of period where, like, I don't want it to be like July, like when the Reebok deal starts, but there needs to be some sort of period where they say, starting this date. Because is it fair? John Jones, cocaine, Anderson Silva, had everything in his system. Nick Diaz had weed. Jessica I had metabolites in her, and didn't she get suspended for a while?
And we just had Ashlee EvansSmith. She just got suspended for 9 months for a dietary drug, which obviously is not a performance-enhancing drug. So I think in this press conference, they really have to, no pun intended, they have to weed out what is and what isn't a performance-enhancing drug. Because to me, those suspensions should vary. Ashlee EvansSmith should not be getting 9 months for using a dietary substance that did not affect her performance in the cage, which, by the way, she lost, and lost pretty bad. When you really look at her case, and then you bring up the Jessica I and the Nick Diaz and the Matt Riddle, marijuana, again, not a performance-enhancing drug, yet these guys are getting thrown the book at it. To me, if it's an actual legitimate performance-enhancing drug, that's where we should see major suspensions. Now, I'm not saying just if it's a failed drug test that nothing should happen. If it's weed, something should happen, but it shouldn't be as severe as someone actually testing for some type of steroids or human growth hormone or whatever else they're using these days.
Hey, Jim, what if they use reverse psychology? And, we know that, we know currently friends of ours like Darren Cruikshank, Brian Ebersol, list goes on and on, never been popped for any kind of drugs or anything like that. Maybe they use reverse psychology and they say, hey, you show up to your fight on weight, on point, pass all your drug tests, here's an extra 10 grand. Maybe they use reverse psychology and throw some money in these guys' pockets to not be on that stuff.
Well, they always say, you catch more flies with honey than, you get more, or the horse performs better with the carrot instead of the stick. The stick would be the suspension and the fines and all that, and then the carrot would be, like you said, extra money.
Yeah. I mean, if your job told you that, you show up, we're going to give you a pee test to make sure you're not drunk every day when you come to work, and at the end of the year, we're going to give you a $10,000 bonus, maybe lay off the bottle for a year.
Yeah, so maybe they'll try, more of that philosophy more so than, like I said, the stick and punishing fines. We'll see. One thing I would like to see, though, Dave, I think a bonus would be nice, but I think one thing they could maybe follow, I think the NFL has a pretty good policy. I think if they fail one drug test, so again, you have to set a date, maybe a fine, maybe a couple months suspension. Or maybe just a couple months suspension. Second offense, fine, double whatever the first link was. The third 1 year, 2 years, however you want to do it, fine. And then the fourth, if they get to a fourth, they can't compete in the UFC.
Yep.
Have a strict set guidelines. And then, like I said, to me, that should be reserved for actual performance-enhancing drugs. Now, if it's a non-performance-enhancing drug, whatever the UFC and or whoever, what is that, WADA, W-A-D-A, whatever the drug testing agencies deem is not a performance-enhancing drug, there still should be suspensions and fines, but it shouldn't be like, hopefully no one does this, but if someone does test positive for marijuana 4 times, they shouldn't be banned for a non-performance enhancing drug from competing in the UFC.
Hey,
but it still should be. Yeah, I mean, they could consider it, I guess, if the person, fails 4 tests over their career, they could have that right, but it shouldn't be maybe as severe for something like that, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Jim, I'm not a big weed fella. Is weed illegal in Detroit or in Michigan?
If you have your medical marijuana card. Michigan is a medical marijuana state.
Okay. But if you
Along
don't...
with California and I think 18 other states, and then obviously the drug is completely legal in Colorado and Washington.
Okay, so if I'm driving through my town and I don't have one of those medical cards, you can go to jail for the possession of marijuana.
Yes, you can. But I believe Illinois, I know Ohio is, I'm not sure if Illinois is, but I know Ohio, at least in terms of the Midwest, and obviously Michigan, I think Indiana, they have decriminalized marijuana. So it is not as high of an offense getting arrested for that substance as opposed to other drugs.
Well, my point would be, if you're going to clean up the sport and they're going to come in with these drastic, changes or whatever, if marijuana is illegal where you're at and you don't have the proper medical marijuana card, you don't have this, you don't have the stuff the way that you need it, and you get caught with it in your system, you should be in some sort of trouble, because it's not legal unless you've gone through the proper channels. And if it's not legal, if I'm running the UFC or the NFL, I don't want anybody doing things that aren't legal.
Right. Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. And like I said, they definitely should be fined and suspended. That should be the case. But like I said, it should not be at the same level as someone actually using a steroid, because it's not a performance-enhancing drug. Is it an illegal substance in most states and most of the country? Yes. But it is not something that gives you the ability, in this case, a UFC fighter, to do your job better. Right. Which is what the problem is. I guess we're kind of going into a tangent, but yes, there should be a suspension there, but some type of plan, and then like you said, and then on the other hand, you add in the incentive. Hey, if you didn't fail this drug test, maybe not all your win bonus, or maybe half of what your win bonus is, you get that money extra or something.
Right.
I think would be nice, because like I said, I think that analogy I brought up, you're with the stick and the carrot. I think that's something that's very real, and I think a lot of people will respond more to that more so than fines and stuff. Because to me, fines and stuff, they don't seem real until it happens. But money, people think that's real before it happens. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. Regardless of what you're thinking about. So, all right. Well, we're talking about steroids in general with the press conference coming up here, but let's get to Anderson Silva. Obviously, it was just 1 test out of 2. Now it comes out that he has failed several tests, and in fact, I think it's now up to 3 failed tests, and 2 of them were drugs that were not cited by the WADA, the WADA. So, yeah. I don't know. It's a crazy situation. These substances that they have very confusing names. It's called benzodiazepines, oxypam, and temazepam, and it was also found with drostonoline metabolites. This was all following UFC 183. Now, I guess the last one, all confusing names, was technically on the World Anti-Doping Agency, that's the WADA, list, but the other 2 are not. He was still cited for them, so that fails the test. Regardless, Dave, obviously this is more than just 1 substance and they happen to show up in 1 test. Like I said, obviously Anderson Silva, overcoming an injury, used some substances. He obviously was not clear whether or not they were banned or not, as cited by some of them being cited, some of them not being. A lot of confusing, but obviously he didn't get the list. And coming over injury, I'm not surprised that he failed the test, because that's one of the things that steroids and some of these performance-enhancing drugs do, is help you come over injury quicker. And I think he used that to help his leg get better. And I don't think it necessarily made him better or worse in the octagon on that Saturday in January, but it did help him get there quicker.
Yeah, it sounds like the only thing that he didn't take was Flintstone vitamins.
He may have. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't get cited for it.
Yeah, it's I mean, I really don't want to be this cut and dry on it, but clearly he took them. Clearly he knew that he took them, and I don't think we'll see Anderson fight again, and it's unfortunate. You know, all that stuff that was in the cage about, oh, I gotta talk to my family. No, you knew you were gonna fail the drug test, pal. That's why you were so emotional and all that. One of the greatest of all times made a mistake. Maybe it wasn't a mistake, but a couple Saturdays ago, probably the last time you'll see Anderson in the cage. That's not on you know, Fight Pass or on Fox Sports 1, you know, a replay or something. Probably be the last time you see him in the cage.
Well, the reason I guess now it's upsetting, because obviously he was very adamant that he didn't take any substances, despite having, you know, the one positive and the one negative. But now that this news has come out that a couple more substances and a couple more tests he has now failed, you definitely know that he took something. There's no way you can have that many substances that are on a banned list without knowing.
Right.
It's very apparent, and it's sad because he was always such an honest and straightforward guy. You know, he soft-spoken, but he always at least told the truth. He seemed like a trustworthy guy. So, is this a mistake on him after all these years of, you know, being a great fighter, and I would actually say a great role model for the mixed martial arts community? It is, but he did not handle it the way you would expect someone like him to handle it. I think, Dave, if right from the start he would have said, you know what, I was trying to get over this injury, I took something, I wasn't sure if it was banned or not, I probably should have looked more into it, I probably should have had my manager tell me more, my doctors assure me that, in fact, this is not a banned substance, and I should have then made arrangements either to take something else or, you know, wait a little longer to fight, but I didn't, and this is what happened, and I'm sorry. I think if something around those lines would have came out immediately, I don't think people would be as maybe up in arms about it. But the fact he went to denial first and now more has come out, I think that's what really taints his image here. And like you said, not the way you'd want to see a guy like Anderson Silva, you know, his last fight in the cage, considering what he's done for this organization.
My last question about PEDs, Jim. Anderson took stuff to come back from an injury. Okay, to help with the recovery of the leg. Did that in any way make him better in the cage, or is the reason that it's illegal and an issue because it increased the healing process? Is that what the problem is? That he recovered much faster than a normal person should or would have?
To be honest, I think it's obviously main use is to perform better, you know, be able to go bigger, faster, stronger, longer, and that stuff. But I think as a byproduct of that, you're able to overcome injury quicker. Now, I don't think the suspension is the sole reason that he got over an injury quicker, because you can do that without these things. It is possible. But it's still the fact that its main use is to perform better. And like I said, the injury thing is a byproduct. Now, in his case, he was probably taking it more so, again, to overcome injury, more so than use it to try to perform better. But nevertheless, that's not what its main function is. So he's getting cited and will get fined and suspended for what that drug is supposed to do, more so than what it did for him.
Right.
That would be my understanding. All right, well, let's real quickly here. The Francisco Rivera thing, it looks as though they're going to uphold the appeal by Rivera and his camp about the eye poke. And I retweeted earlier yesterday about his thoughts on this, and it seems as though he's very disappointed by this. He maybe would like to have Faber, in the future, but he's going to try to move on and try to be better next time. But I think this is something, Dave, that even though it was upheld, I think this is a case that people will go back to and cite. This is why instant replay may be needed in mixed martial arts, a situation like this. Because when you look at the footage again, it is clear Francisco Rivera did get his eye poked. And I think if his eye hadn't got poked in that instance, I don't know, I hate to say that he doesn't get rear naked choke, but I think he's more aware of what's going on and might not get finished that quickly after the poke. That would be my thinking.
Right. It's a tricky situation because it happens live in front of the ref, and at first glance, hard to see. You can't just pause it. You can't just pause the fight for him to run over and look. I understand that. And in the grand scheme of things, if they change it to a no contest, what does that do for either guy? I mean, the UFC is going to take care of both guys. Francisco Rivera is not going to drop that far. He's still going to get a very credible opponent in his next fight. It's unfortunate that it happened. Try to learn ways to make that not happen again and move forward. That's kind of what I'm feeling about it.
All right, well, let's get to World Series of Fighting 18. It happened on Thursday, February 12th, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Main event, Marlon Moraes against Josh Hill. Pretty much the only fight worth watching, Dave. Not a lot else went on in this card. There was also some problems with technical difficulties during the broadcast and whatnot, and then the one fight with the other notable name on this card, Cody McKenzie against Andrew McGuines, that ended up in a disqualification due to a headbutt. It just, I don't know, World Series of Fighting, every event now that they put on, it just seems to get worse and worse, Dave, regardless of what it's on. And I don't know how much longer they'll last putting up shows like this. And I know this is maybe a pipe dream, but I wish that Viacom and Bellator could pony up the money to buy World Series of Fighting, get some of that talent in, and I think actually have a really good organization combining forces, because I don't think separately, especially for the World Series of Fighting, that they really are going to last much longer, not to mention all the problems we've heard about the way they have handled and treated some of their fighters. I just don't think that they're going to last too much longer here.
No, they going with Bellator and Viacom might not be a bad option. I just don't know what kind of value they have for Viacom or for Bellator. Bellator could just go in, grab a couple of the guys, and be better off. I don't even know who. Like, looking at the earlier part of the card, Shane Campbell against Derek Boyle. I don't even know who those guys are. I don't know if they'd be a huge asset to Bellator, or just more people that they would have to pay,
Well, obviously, when they buy the company, they can pick and choose who they want to keep under contract. Right. That would be part of the agreement. But I think a lot of those guys you mentioned some of those guys are probably signed for one-off fights. Obviously, Marlon Moraes is signed to a multi-fight big deal contract. Now, those things would be a lot harder to break, but a lot of their undercard guys probably are not signed past the event that they fought on. So a lot of those guys that we don't know, they really wouldn't have to worry about. But, I feel like depending on the price they could get it for, even if it was just able to bring in a guy like Marlon Moraes and, say, Justin Gaethje, I think at those two guys, it would be worth it.
Isn't Aguilar on World Series of Fighting?
Yes. I forgot Jessica Aguilar. And I think, Jake Shields, Melvin Gillard, if you want to go a little further down the list. But, there's some talent there that I think...
That's a lot further down the list.
Oh, and Husamar Palavas. I'm just saying there are some guys they can bring in that I think would really help Bellator, and I think that their NBC Sports is nice. Don't get me wrong. I think people do watch it, but I think Spike, MMA, Bellator's kind of built up a pretty solid following here now since they've moved over. I just think it would be a lot bigger deal, and if I was Ray Sefo, I think I would. I don't know how much he's put into this, but I'd be starting to look and getting out and see if you can either get your money back or maybe you might even be able to turn a little bit of a profit. I don't know. I just think that they're not going to last much longer.
Yeah, I found the numbers for Bellator 133, the TV numbers, but I can't find the World Series of Fighting numbers. I would love to see those.
They have to be significantly lower.
I would think so.
So anyway, the fight real quick. Moraes won. I think everyone expected him to win. I think Josh Hill performed better than I thought he was going to do. I think he held his own. But I think the thing with Moraes, I think in this one, he got hurt early. I think that early kind of flurry there towards the middle of the round, the first round there, I think did phase Moraes, and I think it busted up his nose, and I think that maybe affected him. But after the fight, or after that round, I should say, for the rest of the fight, Josh Hill never really attacked kind of with that same velocity or ferocity, however you want to say it, with a flurry like that. And if you're going to kind of sit back and try to trade countering with Marlon Moraes, you're not going to win. And that's basically what happened the rest of the fight. Josh Hill was kind of, was more slower pace, and if you're going to fight at that pace, Marlon Moraes is going to beat you every time. And that's what happened. And, it's another win for Moraes, and once again, it's a fight where, all right, we need to see him fight someone better. Josh Hill's nice. He was 10-0, best 135er in Canada, or however you want to say it, but we need to see Moraes fight better competition.
Yep. It's kind of like, I don't know. It would kind of like be, like Faber is one of the best in the UFC at 135. It would kind of be like watching him just like go to the RFA and just beat guys up. Like, he needs to be in there against top level competition, and that's the same thing as Moraes. Yeah, like you said, Hill was nice, but when I tune in, I want to see a dominant champion be a dominant champion over a dominant challenger. You know what I mean? Or over a game challenger. Much like they keep showing it, the Jones-Teixeira fight. You know that Teixeira was good, but Jones just destroyed him. That's what I want to see my champ do.
And also, when you have a champion who's so dominant, you want to have somebody that you think has a chance to beat them. You want to build some intrigue. When he's fighting somebody like Josh Hill that has no chance of beating him, you lose a lot of interest in the fight, especially when you're building it up as that's the fight to see for this event. It's hard to get excited about a fight when you know one guy's going to win.
Right.
All right. Bellator 133. Fight started off kind of slow. You had a big win. I believe it was Honeycutt, right? He was the winner. And in the first fight against Clayton McFarland, and then Julia Budd just absolutely dominated Gabriel Holloway. This one was not even close. Even just looking at the size differential, Budd's 5'8" at the 145 class, and you have Holloway at 5'3", and Budd's just an absolute monster. That was not even close. Then we had a pretty entertaining fight for the co-main event as Daniel Weichel took on former Bellator featherweight champion Pat Curran, and I don't know what it is with Pat Curran lately, Dave, but he just doesn't seem to pull the trigger enough. Right. Whatever the case may be, he just seems really tentative, and it's lost him his last two fights. And Daniel Weichel pulls the big upset. He should have already gotten a title shot because he won a featherweight tournament, but now he, to me, super earned it by beating Pat Curran. And I don't know if it's because Curran thought it was a 5-round fight or something. He had 2 more rounds, but it's not that he isn't good or isn't talented or can't be anybody on Bellator's 145 roster, but if you're not going to throw combinations, punches, and bunches when you don't have that one-shot knockout power, which Curran does not, you have to be active. You have to be more in these guys' faces. You can't just sit back and counter all the time. And once again, he finds himself on the losing end of a decision.
Yeah, it's weird. It just it's hard to explain. Like, I mean, when he beat Joe Warren, those next 3 fights after that, or the 3 fights leading up to the Warren fight, and then like 2 of them after, it looked like he was, he could take on anybody at the UFC level, and at least be competitive. But then he goes out there and he has a stinker against. I mean, Weichsel's a good guy. I mean, he's he won a tournament, but I don't know if it's a mental. If there's some sort of block when he gets in there, it's not for a belt. He can't, he can't get himself up for it. I don't know, but since he lost the belt, he had that fight in Hammond that I went to, and then he had this one. So he wasn't comfortable when he was at home. He wasn't comfortable. I don't know, man. It's just it's me. I think it's something mental, but
yeah, 'cause it's either he has to go to a strategy where he's either throwing. If you're going to throw less, you have to throw with power. You have to throw with purpose. And it doesn't seem like he's doing that. So, all right, if you're not going to throw power, then you got to go with speed. Throw your punches and bunches. Your T.J. Dillashaw, your Dominic Cruz, your Diaz brothers. You got to kind of pick and choose. But he's kind of in the middle, Dave, of those 2 strategies, and it's not working for him. Case in point, he lost the fight against Pitbull, where, sure, again, close fight, but he didn't do enough to win. This fight against Daniel Weichel, sure, close fight, but he's not the one moving forward. He's not the one going in there throwing shots, whether they're missing or not. He's not pushing the action, and he's not doing anything in return to make his opponents not come after him. So,
Yep.
yes, something has to change for him. And like you said, I think it's mentally, because it's not, like I said, he has all the talent in the world and has a lot of tools, but it just doesn't, at least in these last couple fights, he hasn't put it all together. And I don't know if he needs to take a time away from the camp. Training, being in the gym every day. I know, obviously, his cousin, Jeff Kern, he trains with, Kern Mixed Martial Arts in Illinois. Maybe just for one camp, maybe do something different. Go to another camp. He can still have Jeff in his corner and whatnot, but maybe switch things up. I don't know. Something needs to change for him.
Hey, real quick, because I know we're trying to get out of here in time for this press conference here. Who do you think made the most money on Bellator 133?
Without looking, either say it was Kern or Shlemenko.
Daniel Weichel pulled home $32,000 is your winner.
Really?
Yeah.
That's because he got the win bonus, right?
Yeah,
well, Shlemenko would have got a win bonus.
Yeah.
So how did she make more than Shlemenko?
Daniel Weichel made $32,000. Curran and Shlemenko both made $20,000. And Chris Honeycutt made $20,000, and Julia Budd came in second place at $24,000.
That doesn't seem right, even with especially with Shlemenko, because he won. Maybe now it's not including their win bonus. I don't know. Maybe that's undisclosed. Again, Bellator is a private company. Maybe they gave him more money, but just looking at the base contract, Dave, there's no way that 2 guys that are former champions are only making $20,000. That seems low.
Yep. It says here in the article, it could be assumed that the winners had some sort of show plus win set up.
Okay.
Meaning Weichel probably made 16 and 16, but still the question remains: why is Shlemenko's salary so low?
Right. It explains 16 and 16 for Weichel, but does that mean that Shlemenko was 10 and 10? Like that? See, that's what I mean. It doesn't make sense. Something.
What grinds my gears, Jim, is everybody is hip. Look at my hat. What's that say? UFC. Everybody wants to talk about how much money they make and how much money they don't pay their fighters and all of that.
And Bellator is doing the same thing.
Bellator is doing the exact same thing. Free pass. Nobody cares.
So, well, real quickly on that main event, I think that was just about what we expected. Something crazy to happen. Somebody was going to get knocked out, and it was Shlemenko. Now, he was throwing a spinning back fist, but it was actually a spinning back forearm is what knocked out Melvin Manhoef. But it was nice to see Alexander Shlemenko, get back, get a win. I'd like to see a rematch with Halsey. I hate to say Halsey's win was a fluke, but I mean, getting submitted like that. We've never seen Shlemenko at 185 pounds. Let me clarify that. At 185 pounds, lose like that. So I'd like to see him get another shot at Halsey. And, that was classic Shlemenko fashion there in the main event.
Yeah, I was watching it with this guy. See it on my computer there? See? Huh?
Gotcha.
Okay. I was watching it with him, and he goes, man, he said, if they keep throwing any more spinning shit, he said, I'm going to throw up.
And also, real quickly, after his last big knockout, I said Melvin Manhoef should probably think about retiring. Once again, he gets knocked out cold. I'm still under the same argument. How many more people I think are going to jump on that bandwagon? I mean, you can't just continue getting knocked out like that. That is not good for you.
No.
And like I said, Melvin Manhoef's on the wrong side of 35. He doesn't have that much more fights in him anyway. He's got to be looking to hang him up here pretty soon.
Hey,
if people weren't taking me seriously after the last one, I hope they do now.
Hey, take it easy on the 35 chatter, huh?
You're not a professional athlete, though.
Take it easy. Hey, real quick, just your quick thoughts while you're clicking up the review for the fight night. Spike TV says Bellator 133 averaged 606,000 viewers with +3 DVR. I'm not sure exactly what that means. But
I think the 3 is supposed to be 3,000.
Okay.
I think I wouldn't be. That's what I'm thinking. So yeah, they are, Dave, finally starting to throw in DVR numbers with that, and the +3, I think is within like a 3-day span. I think that's what they do, and then they also have a +7 numbers as well.
Telecast peaked with 967,000 viewers. Average live viewership was 565,000. Which leads me to one simple question. At what point were there almost 1 million people watching?
Had to be during the co-main and main, because those first 2 fights had to turn off people. Those first 2 fights were not good. Those were not good. If you would have tuned, I bet people tuned in. They're like, nope. They're like, I'm gonna wait, and then they turned back into the final 2, and that's why you saw that huge spike in numbers. No pun intended.
That's the 3rd time you've made it a very decent. What do you call those? Puns.
But it wasn't intended. All right.
You say it's not intended. It's completely intended.
Okay, the weed one was kind of, but that one wasn't. All right. Let's. And World Series of Fighting had to be about 1/5 of that number, right?
Hey. Yeah. Hey, did you mention that we're sponsored by Fight Chicks?
Yes, sir.
Did you notice that I had on my Alpha Cat shirt?
There it is. That's a little over a week.
Yeah. How about before we get into UFC, just a reminder. I know Jake and Elizabeth, they just posted it up that Charmaine Not So Sweet Tweet is she's fighting Cyborg next Friday, and she's gonna have the Fight Chicks logo all over her. So that's cool.
Good to hear. Can't wait. Should be a fun card.
You can catch that on Fight Pass. You know who won't be there?
Friday, February 27th.
You know who won't be there? Ray Flores.
Well, he'll be watching, though.
He probably has a microphone at home. He'll be practicing.
All right, let's get to
Ladies and gentlemen.
Field. Henderson versus Thatch, the main event. First fight of the evening, flyweight, Ray Borg against Chris Kalidas. We were kind of questioning maybe why this fight was on the main card, Dave, but I think compared to a few others, I think this one, at least early on, was one of my favorite fights of the night, and I thought Ray Borg, very, very great performance by him. Obviously a little undersized compared to Kalidas, the Greek assassin, but he just kept on pushing the wrestling, 5 of 6 in the takedowns, landed some ground and pound, outstruck Kalidas 45-28, and just kept working and working. Had a couple submissions early on, attempts I should say, with an armbar and whatnot, but finally in the third he was able to move around, get side. He stepped over. It looked like he had the Kimura locked up, then kind of let go at one point, readjust, and I think that readjustment, Dave, maybe threw kind of Kalaitis off thinking, hey, I'm safe here, I don't have to worry about it, and then boom, he went right back to the Kimura and got the tap in the third round. And I don't know if that was intentional, him kind of letting off to reset, or if it was actually he was going to reset and then he just decided, nah, well, you know what, let me give it another shot, especially since the other arm for Kalaitis was nowhere close near the arm he was trying the Kimura on, which is a lot harder to defend when you're basically just trying to gut it out with one arm when the other guy has two over you in the position that he did. So regardless of the case, he got the submission victory. I think Ray Borg is a guy the flyweight division is going to have to look out for here moving forward.
Yep, very impressive ground game. You know, he was, like you said, kind of a weird situation where he was going for it, got it, you know, kind of gave it up almost, and then went right back at it again. But, yeah, Ray looked very good in that fight, and, you know, he needs a couple more opportunities in the cage to, you know, sharpen some things up and, you know, get in front of the masses, I guess, before he can compete for that belt. But no, has anybody really tried a ground game against Mighty Mouse?
I guess you could say the Russian guy, Ali Bogatinov, I think, tried to take him down, and ended up just getting stuck in the clinch and getting kneed to death. That was the only fighter that really tried it.
Right. I mean, maybe somebody can do something on the ground. You know, maybe that's the path to beat Mighty Mouse. If he's on the ground, he can't move as fast. I mean,
yeah,
maybe Borg's onto something. I called him Bjork. My bad.
That's
not
the
Bjork.
Icelandic singer. All right, next fight of the evening, Motown Phenom, my hometown guy here, Kevin Lee took on Michel Prazeres. And you want to talk about conditioning, you want to talk about being able to fight at elevation. Well, I think Kevin Lee proved that in the sport you can't just always have, you know, physical, big, strong muscles, or it's not always about, you know, your jiu-jitsu background or your striking background. I think conditioning has a lot to do with it, and I think he showed in this fight. When you look at the striking totals, Dave, he outstruck Prazeres 118-38.
That's all right.
After the first round, which was 17-14 in favor of total strikes, you could just tell that Prazeres was not the same after that first round, because here are the striking totals for round 2 and 3. Round 2, 49-13, and then 52-11, all in favor of the Motown Phenom, Kevin Lee. Also couple in, Kevin Lee was 4 of 5 on his takedowns, especially in that second and third round where he was successful on all 4 of his takedown attempts, really landed some nasty ground and pound. I think was close to a submission or two there. And I think this was a fight where Kevin Lee, he was the better conditioned athlete, and it showed. Regardless of, you know, elevation or whatnot, Kevin Lee was a more complete fighter. And you know, I'm looking forward to this guy's career. I think he has a lot of skills and attributes, and I think that he's added that now, this conditioning factor, to go along with his great kickboxing skills, and obviously he's really starting to develop his ground game, which I think we saw, you know, with his takedowns in this fight. You know, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with moving forward in the 155 division.
Hey, do you think when I go to the concert at Joe Louis, do you think after that people will be referring to me as the Motown Phenom?
Oh boy, my guess is no.
I mean, is it possible? That's what I'm asking.
All right, to quote Dumb and Dumber here, I guess you have a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance. I'm glad you quoted that part of Dumb and Dumber instead of the I desperately want to make love to a schoolboy like you.
I'll leave that one to you, Dave. All right. Next fight.
No,
go ahead.
There's not. I mean, Kevin Lee looked great. I believe a lot of people on Twitter were calling Prazeres the roided-up Brazilian guy that's about ready to pass out. So there you go. There's my synopsis of the fight. I wrote down roided-up Brazilian. I was Anderson?
Right. I want to get to the next fight because it's very intriguing in terms of how you wanted to score it, and some fans were booing it, but I actually thought it was relatively entertaining as Patrick Walsh took on Dan Kelly. Very interesting when you look at the numbers. Dan Kelly outstruck Walsh 61-52. But in terms of thrown strikes, Patrick Walsh threw 298 strikes in this fight to just 190 for Dan Kelly. So when you see that, and obviously you throw about 100 more strikes than your opponent, but you land 9 less, you got to make a change. You can't just be throwing. It's one thing to be active, Dave, and I think he has that part down, but you got to land shots. You know,
Yep.
You got to see that's a horrible percentage. 51 of about 300. That's 16%.
Not
Give or
good.
take, right? If I'm not mistaken. You got to be landing more than 16% of your strikes to win a fight. That's plain and simple. And I think it was a close fight. If you can make a case that Walsh might have won because obviously he's being the more aggressive fighter. He threw 100 more strikes, but Kelly hung in there, hung tough. And I thought of the power shots landed, Dave, I think Kelly with his countering landed the more power shots. And the one question I really have for this fight, and I'm not expecting you to answer it fully, but with Walsh being so aggressive and throwing that many strikes, it really is amazing to me that Dan Kelly, a 4-time Judo Olympian, was credited with 0 takedown attempts. It just baffled me that he didn't try it once to take down Walsh. And he got the win, don't get me wrong, but we'll always talk about taking the path of least resistance, Dave, and I think he at least should have attempted 1 or 2, right? Test the waters out a little bit. I think it would have maybe made for an easier fight and possibly a finish for him.
Well, here's my thing. Dan Kelly, Olympian, true. Patrick Walsh was probably close to 215 pounds by the time the fight started. He didn't even come close to making weight. Not even close. Like 7 pounds over. Which gives him a head start going into a fight on the rehydration process. And it's extremely possible that Dan Kelly got into that fight and was like, this guy is huge, and just felt like he couldn't take him down. Maybe that's part of it, that he just felt he couldn't do it. He was just too big. But it would kind of be like in a Rousey fight, her not trying to go for at least 1 armbar. You know what I mean? Like, you're Dan Kelly. Like, the reason you're where you are is because of your takedowns. So, I mean, it's kind of strange he wouldn't,
That's what I mean, at least 1?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, he got the win, but yeah, I think Walsh obviously is going to have to work on his weight and work on his landing accuracy. Because I think he showed some flashes of, maybe he could do something in the UFC.
Right.
But obviously Dan Kelly, he was on point. Like you said, maybe the overweight thing changed his game plan, but he sat there and countered. He stuck to his game plan and did enough for the win.
On a side note, I would rather the UFC take a stand against guys missing weight so much than drugs, because that pisses me off to no end. When you miss it by 7 pounds, you didn't even care. You gave up.
Yeah, a system probably should be in place for that as well.
Did you watch the weigh-ins?
No, I did not.
I'm going to do live action on the show. Are you watching? You watching?
Yes.
He walks up there, and Bert's like, he takes off his shirt, and he goes, "Hey, Bert, you want me to take off my shorts?" Like, he's like, "You want me to get the towel?" Like, he does this whole routine, and then he gets on there, and they're like, this is a middleweight contest. Weighs in at 192. Like, what did you think was in your shorts?
Yeah.
He thought he was going to take off his shorts and 7 pounds was just going to fall off.
Ridiculous. Next fight of the evening, 170 pounds, Neil Magny against Kiichi Kunamoto. And Dave, out of all the fights he's won here on this now 6-fight winning streak, I think this was the most impressive, as he just absolutely dominated and, to me, outclassed Kiichi Kunamoto as he outstruck him. We showed you the striking totals in the Kevin Lee fight. This is even more impressive. 142-20 in terms of total strikes for Neil Magny. He was also successful on 3 of 4 takedowns, which led to the rear naked choke coming in the 3rd round. And I already thought this was a bad matchup for Kunimoto. I really wasn't sure why it was booked. I thought Neil Magny was going to run over him, and he did. And now, can we finally get Neil Magny top 15 competition? It's time. I mean, he's won 6 fights in a row against guys, towards the bottom end of this division, and he's beaten them all, and he couldn't have been more dominant on Saturday night. They got to give someone this guy to give him a challenge. It's ridiculous, Dave, that it's took this many fights for the UFC to go, oh, I guess he's pretty good. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Okay, 2 things. One, when you refer to Neil, you have to refer to him as Neil the Grim Reacher Magny, because he's got the long... Hey, that's a legitimate nickname.
All right.
We put it on Twitter, and Michael Bisping said it during the weigh-ins. If you go back and watch it, he says that there's guys on Twitter calling him the Grim Reacher.
All right.
This guy. What was I going to say? What's fascinating is that Kelvin Gastelum is currently ranked 10 in the welterweight division and won 3 fights to get there and had weight problems on all. Neil shows up on weight, on point, wins 6 in a row. He lost a couple when he first got in, but then he wins 6 in a row, and he's still not ranked.
And also, Kevin Gastelum was afforded the opportunity to take on better competition.
Yeah. Neil Magny might beat Johnny Hendricks, but when you keep giving him Kichi Kunimoto, we're never going to find out.
That's what I mean. And after 4 fights, Kevin Gastelum had already fought Rick Story and Jake Ellenberger. Neil Magny hasn't fought anyone on either of those 2 guys' levels.
What do you think about Neil Magny versus the winner of this Saturday's feature welterweight bout between Jake Ellenberger and Josh Koscheck? I'm sorry.
That's at 184.
That's at 184. I'm sorry.
I'm fine with that.
My logic is both of the big names are coming off of they're going to be back on the winning track, one of them, and if they can beat Neil Magny, it shows that they should still stick around in that top 10. And if Neil Magny beats them, then it shows that he belongs in the top 10, and those guys are probably on their way out. So.
Or I don't know how, obviously he was supposed to be in the main event of this card. I don't know how long he'll be out, but I wouldn't be opposed to Stephen Thompson against Neil Magny.
Yeah, ironic. Wow. He's not even ranked. They had Brandon Thatch and Stephen Thompson main event a card, and they're not even ranked? Wow.
So.
Anyway.
Yeah. Now, obviously, he wouldn't fight Thatch because they train together at Elevation Fight Team.
Yeah.
So. Though that would be a good fight. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Co-main event of the evening, Max Holloway against Cole Miller. I thought Cole Miller early on, Dave, I think his range, his kind of awkward style there of striking, I think kind of affected Max Holloway, and I think I would have gave Cole Miller the first round. And then I think in the second and third round, I think Max Holloway, he figured out the range, he figured out what Miller was doing, and figured Miller really wasn't going to throw anything that was going to hurt him. And I think Max Holloway really figured things out, and I think really brought it to Cole Miller in rounds 2 and 3, especially in round 3 where he outstruck the former Ultimate Fighter contestant 38-11 en route to overall outstriking him 66-35, not to mention that he was also successful on takedown. And I think this was a big fight for Max Holloway because obviously I think he dropped the first round, and I think most people would agree that he lost the first round. He was able to come back, win, and end the fight looking like the winner. To me, when that fight ended, I don't think anyone was like, "Oh, Cole Miller won that fight." Cole Miller was all bloodied up and banged up and everything, and I think he took Cole Miller out of his game plan, and obviously I think it was deserved to give him, again, talk about next level competition, to give him a fight against someone the caliber of a Cub Swanson.
Yeah, Max Holloway looked great in his fight. I'm intrigued to see the Cub Swanson fight. It's it's a chance that is deserved, and it's a chance that they need to give a lot more guys, like the aforementioned Magny. They need to. You can't. Neil Magny and Max Holloway are beating guys that they're supposed to be beating, and they need to be rewarded for that. I mean, they're putting in the hard work. They're showing up. Have you ever heard Max Holloway like, oh, I heard he's terrible in interviews. Oh, Max Holloway missed weight. Oh, Max Holloway's on drugs. Oh, Neil Magny. Give these guys some positive reinforcement. Like, they're doing things the right way for you. Most times they're finishing fights, and I don't know. Well deserved for Max Holloway, and the Cub Swanson fight should be fun. I think Cub's a better fighter, just preliminary talk, but I have a feeling that Max Holloway is he's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve that might throw Cub off his game.
Main event of the evening, Brandon Thatch against Ben Henderson. Ben Henderson, of course, moving up a weight class on about 2 weeks' notice to take on the young up-and-comer and Brandon Thatch. And what a fight, Dave. I think, at least so far for the UFC in 2015, this may be my favorite fight. I thought this was a fun fight. It was a great fight. I thought both guys landed some tremendous shots that could end the fight. I mean, Henderson had that right hook to the body going all night. Thatch had some great straight combinations, also some knees, some great kicks. I just thought this was a fantastic fight, and Thatch, I think, came out very strong. I thought he definitely won those first 2 rounds, and I think some of the body shots, maybe some of the kicks, and I just think, obviously, Henderson up a weight class. He always was a great condition athlete at 155, and I think Thatch, it's not the fact he doesn't have good conditioning, but you add in the layoff with never having been into a 3rd or a 4th round that often, and in the case of the 4th, never going that long in a fight, I think started to kind of wear on him. And you saw Ben Henderson kind of slowly take over. Case in point, when you look at the round-by-round numbers, as Henderson outstruck Thatch 31-9 in round 3, and then 21-9 in round 4 en route to the rear naked choke submission. And I think this, for Thatch, he was in this fight. He had a chance to win. I think he has a promising future, but I think he learned, he kind of said maybe he should have went a little more speed instead of power. Maybe his conditioning would have been there and whatnot. But I think his performance coming off that long a layoff, going that deep against the guy the caliber of Ben Henderson, I think this kid can only hold his head up high. I think he has a bright future. And for Ben Henderson, you look at this performance, he took some heavy shots in those first 2 rounds. He kept coming. I mean, there aren't too many guys that harder than Brandon Thatch at 170, and he took those shots, was able to continue, go on, win the fight, get the finish. I don't know if Ben Henderson can be a champion at 170, but I think he proved that he can be formidable at this weight class. As Dave cues up.
Yeah.
It goes. This fight shows you a couple things. One, training at elevation is good, but cage time is what gets your cardio where it needs to be. Brandon Thatch was manhandling Ben Henderson for a little bit, but I don't know if it's an adrenaline dump or if it's not being in that 3rd and 4th round ever. I don't know what it is, but big win for Ben Henderson. I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know how I feel about Ben at 170. Granted, that was on 2 weeks. I think that if he's going to make a concerted effort at 170, I think he needs to put on a little bit more muscle. Perhaps I'm no physique expert here, but I think that would be a wise choice for him. And yeah, another main event win for Ben Henderson. Is anybody shocked that Ben Henderson won a main event? Just so people know, Jim, it is 12 o'clock, and I'm keeping an eye to Twitter. The press conference is about ready to start. It's Dana, Lorenzo, and Lawrence Epstein.
All right. Well, we'll try to get through our picks and everything for Mir Bigfoot here as quickly as we can so people can tune into that. So let's get to that card. Bigfoot versus Mir, Brazil, this Sunday, Fox Sports 1. Santiago Ponzinibbio against Sean Strickland is the first fight of the evening in the welterweight division. Ponzinibbio 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Wendell Oliveira at the last Bigfoot main event card against Andrei Arlovsky late last year, and 11 of his 19 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Strickland 2-0 in the UFC, his last fight was a win at middleweight against Luke Barnott at the UFN Berlin card, and 7 of his 15 career wins are by knockout. This should be interesting. Strickland kind of was an undersized middleweight. I think he'll make more of a home here at welterweight. Ponzinibbio, a guy at welterweight, I think has some good striking, but obviously in both his fights, a guy that's not a great conditioned fighter yet. Hasn't learned to kind of put that conditioning together. And I think Strickland going 15 minutes with a guy as big as Luke Barnott, able to get a victory, even though that wasn't a great fight, I got to lean towards Strickland here. And I don't know. I'd like to see a little more excitement, a little more aggressiveness from Strickland. Maybe at 170 we'll see that. Maybe see a little more power. So it should be an interesting fight here between two of the younger guys at 170.
Yeah, I don't even know how I feel about this one, Jim. It's a good fight to kick off the card. Ponzinibbio, I just never got behind him in the fights that he's had. Just never been a huge fan. Maybe that's just me. But, big fan of Sean Strickland. I like the Tarzan nickname. And this is considering it's going to be on Fox Sports 1, this is a fine fight to start it out. And, I always tell people, don't sleep on these fights that you don't know who these guys are. You never know which one of these guys is the next Stephen Thompson, Neil Magny, Brandon Thatch. You can see one of these guys main event a card very soon.
The next fight of the evening is in the bantamweight division as Sainz will take on Ulrich Alcantara. Looking at Alcantara, he is 6-2 with the no contest in the UFC, currently riding a 3-fight winning streak. His last fight was a win over Russell Doane at the Bigfoot Orlovsky card. And of his 31 career victories, 25 finishes, Dave, with 13 knockouts and 12 submissions. Looking at Sainz, just 1-0 in the UFC, but he is overall riding a 5-fight winning streak. His last fight was a win over Nolan Tickman at the UFC Fight Night in Bangor, Maine. And 4 of his 9 career victories are by decision. Now, Alcantara, I think, is maybe one fight away from cracking the top 15 once again in terms of fighting that level of competition. He had a very close fight not too long ago against Uriah Faber, and I think with another win, he's right up there in that category. And I think a lot of people talk about his jiu-jitsu background, but like I said, this guy has really improved his stand-up, and obviously the majority of his wins, as I read off, are by knockout. So this is a guy that is multifaceted at the 135 division, and Sainz definitely is an up-and-comer in the weight class, 5-fight winning streak and whatnot, but I'm not sure if he has the skills to take out Alcantara, especially being down in Brazil, where Alcantara, I don't think, has lost fighting down in his home country. So it's definitely a big step up for Sainz, but I think Alcantara, he can't look past Sainz, but this is a kind of a stepping stone to get back into that upper echelon of competition.
I just want to clarify one thing, Jim. Did you say that with a win, he'll begin to get guys that are in the top 15?
Yes, I think he's ranked, but yeah. I mean, obviously Sainz is not in the top 15.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, because he is ranked 8. So, yeah. I just wanted to clarify anybody that's taking notes and, may want to go to the bar with a notepad full of Beyond the Cage nuggets.
Right.
Not chicken nuggets, Beyond the Cage nuggets. No, I think that what you said is absolutely right. A victory for Alcantara gets him some of those other guys, which will allow him to move up the rankings. His fight with Faber, it wasn't awful. So I think Alcantara has a pedigree where he can be in that top 5, top 6. But I mean, even if he were to beat Frankie Sainz, however it's pronounced, even if he were to beat him, I don't think that he would even move up from 8 to 7. I think he just kind of just keeps the status quo, stays there, and yeah, I mean, yeah, that's about it. Sorry.
We talked to Eddie. We talked to Eddie Wineland a couple weeks ago. Eddie against Alcantara, I think, would be a good fight.
Let's not get carried away. He wants to beat the crap out of Brian Caraway, and we can all get behind him.
All right. He has to finish Caraway first, and then Alcantara.
Yeah, I'll get behind any of that, but let's focus on Caraway's face first.
All right. The next fight of the evening, lightweight division, Rustam Khabilov against Adriano Martins. Khabilov 3-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Ben Henderson back at the fight night in Albuquerque, and 8 of his 17 career victories are by decision. Looking at Martins, 2-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Juan Puig at the Ultimate Fighter 19 finale, and 12 of his 26 career victories are by knockout. Now, Khabilov, obviously, great grappler. He showed that on several occasions. Solid striking, but obviously getting in the clinch, taking guys down, and being up that way, using that Sambo background is kind of what he's known best for. And Adriano Martins does have some submissions, does have some striking power, but the thing he probably has most is just he's a huge dude at 155 pounds. He is probably one of the bigger lightweights out there, and I remember when he fought Darren Cruikshank and we talked to him after that fight, he was like, man, he's like, that's the biggest dude I think I've ever seen at 155. And Darren's been around the game for a while, so for him to say that means something. So will Khabilov's skills translate to such a big guy? At least early on, that is something that he's going to have to deal with, the just size of Martins. Now, with being that big, his conditioning might not be there. Now, we really haven't seen Martins go very deep into fights, at least in his UFC tenure. So if this thing goes into the second and third, with Khabilov, kind of being the grinder like that, I think that plays to the Russians' advantage. So I think if Martins can't get this thing out of the first, I think despite the size, I think Khabilov's skill and technique and grinding style, I think, will wear out on the Brazilian. That's kind of my thinking of how this fight's going to go.
Skill and technique was a word I was going to use, Jim. Martins is a huge guy, but I think the skill and technique of Khabilov is going to minimize that. I think he can take anybody down in the division, and I think that's what we're going to see here.
I mean, he took Ben Henderson down, so he didn't win, but he still took him down. Yep. All right, the next fight of the evening, middleweight division. I'm really excited about that. I think I'm most excited about this fight on the card. Sam Alvey against Cesar Ferreira. Alvey 1-1 in the UFC since coming over from the MFC. His last fight was a win over Dylan Andrews, knocked him out in the first round at UFN Sydney, and 15 of his 24 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Ferreira, 4-1 in the UFC. He had a big bounce-back win after his loss to CB Dalloway. He defeated Andrew Craig at the Fight Night in Albuquerque. 3 of his 8 career victories are by knockout. Once again, this is something where size will come into a factor. Obviously, Sam Alvey is a decent middleweight guy who has fought some at 170, but obviously feels more comfortable at 185, whereas Ferreira is a monster at 185. He's probably one of the biggest middleweights in the division. This guy's huge, and will that power, will that strength, will that affect Sam Alvey? And I think this is a fight where Sam Alvey's going to have to stick and move and use those great kicks of his, because I don't think he can get him close and really get into too many fist exchanges where he leaves himself maybe open for a counter with Ferreira, because this guy can deliver some bombs, Dave. But it should be fun. Both guys are typically entertaining, and it's my pick for fight, and I'm really excited. I think we're going to see a very fun and entertaining fight.
Yeah, I think Sam Alvey is going to relish in the opportunity to be down in Brazil. He's been around the game for a while too. And what is it? Ferreira? Is that how it is?
Yeah, I don't know. They go back and forth between calling him Ferreira and Ferreira. I don't know. He is Cesar Mutante, so
Yeah.
However you want to call him.
The guy we'll call him the guy on that side of my screen.
Right. Vitor Belfort's understudy. How about that?
Yeah.
Which is true.
I think this is definitely going to be the fight of the night. The next two are going to be very good fights as well. But these are two up and coming guys that a win could probably get them towards that, right at that top 15, knocking on the door. So yeah, this is a good one. Make sure you tune in for this one.
The next one is also a very big fight in the lightweight division, as you have two top 15 guys going at it, as Edson Barboza takes on Michael Johnson. Barboza 9-2 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Bobby Green at the Fight Night in Austin, and 10 of his 15 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Michael Johnson, 7-4 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Melvin Gillard back at the Fight Night in London, and 7 of his 15 career victories are by knockout. I think standing up, Barboza is the better fighter. I think Johnson has good stand-up and has really developed those skills, but you don't want to mess with Edson Barboza on the feet. And I think that was, Bobby Green had a pretty good strategy moving forward. I think that kind of threw Barboza off his game, but even that strategy obviously didn't work for Green. He still lost that fight. So even if Johnson kind of employs that strategy, Barboza has kind of learned and can adjust on the fly. I think we saw that in the Green fight. So that, was a strategy you thought maybe could work. Now I think it's proven that probably not a good idea. For Michael Johnson, though, I think he does have to be aggressive, kind of be in his face a little bit like Bobby Green. But unlike Green, he has to mix in some takedown attempts. And obviously Michael Johnson, I think, is more prone to that than Bobby Green. And I think that's what Johnson has to do. I think you got to try to get this guy to the mat, because I think it's been proven on several occasions that you just don't want to stand up with this guy. So the longer a fight goes on standing up, more times than not, Dave, he's proven that he's going to land something on you, and you're going to be on the floor unconscious.
Yeah, this is my co-pick for Fight of the Night. Can I do that?
You can do that.
Okay. This is a great fight. I've said it from day one of doing the podcast. Every time we see Michael Johnson, it's a new and improved Michael Johnson. Every time. What's he going to do this time? Who knows? Edson Barboza has done nothing but steadily climb up the rankings. So, it's this fight's going to be great. To be completely honest, this fight could have headlined the card.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, let's get to the main event, which I'm not excited for, as Frank Mir is taking on Bigfoot Silva. And the reason I'm not excited about this, so far in the UFC, Antonio Bigfoot Silva is 2-4-1, coming off a knockout loss to Andrei Arlovski in the first round. Mir, 14-9 in the UFC, is currently riding a 4-fight losing streak and looked awful in his last fight against Alistair Overeem, again, a year ago at UFC 169. I think the winner of this, or the loser of this fight should be forced to retire. They're both 35 years old. If Mir loses, that'd be 5 in a row, and if Bigfoot loses, that'll run his overall UFC record to 2-5-1, and that win was a long time ago against, I believe, Travis Brown, if I'm not mistaken, which probably he only won because Travis Brown tore his ACL in that fight.
Right.
I'm just not excited about this fight, Dave. I can't even give a technical breakdown. This is probably, we talk about like throwing together main events and stuff, and the fight to sell. I don't know who's excited about this fight, and it doesn't do anything for the heavyweight division because neither of these guys are going to beat Cain Velasquez or Junior Dos Santos.
Think about this. Travis Brown hurts his knee and extends Bigfoot Silva's career for what, 3 years?
Pretty much.
If Travis Brown wrecks Bigfoot Silva, Bigfoot's tendon bar or something in some Brazilian bar.
Yeah, I'm not excited. There might be a finish. I don't know. I don't really care. I'll have to pick a winner here coming up, but I'm not excited about this. And like you said, I think Johnson Barboza would have been a better main event with this being the co-main. I don't care about name recognition or whatever. Just how do you can't build. The reason is because how do you build this fight up with that many losses between these guys in the last year or two? Anyway, all right. Let's get to picks because I'm frustrated.
Let's
just talking about this main event.
Let's get to picks, and then let me break some information from this hearing for those that are still with us here.
All right, Ponzinibbio and Strickland welterweight division. I'm going Sean Strickland here. I'll take the American.
I'll take the American as well, sir.
All right. Bantamweight Alcantara against Sainz. I think Sainz, he might have a future here at bantamweight, but I think at this point in time, Alcantara is the better fighter in the fight to pick, or the fighter to pick too in this one.
Yeah, you have to pick Alcantara in this one.
Khabibov against Martins. I think Martins has a good chance to. Size definitely helps, and I think he can finish Khabibov, but I think that grinding sambo style there of the Russian will get him the victory.
Yeah, Khabibov with takedowns also my pick for this one.
Sam Alvey against Cesar Fajeda, the man known as Mutante. We got to interview Sam Alvey not too long ago. Maybe we can get him after this fight, Dave. I'm a big fan of Sam Alvey, so it's really hard for me to pick against him. I think Fajeda has a very good chance to win, but I'm going to go with my man Smiling Sam in this one.
Yeah, I'll take Smiling Sam since I met him and you interviewed him.
No, you were on the call with me, I believe.
I was on the call. I interviewed him.
You were on that one.
I interviewed him. You were just on my coattails for that one.
Oh, jeez. All right. Let's get on to the co-main event of the evening. Edson Barboza against Michael Johnson. Again, fun fight. Excited about this one, but Edson Barboza, I think since starting to train with Frankie Edgar and those guys over in New Jersey, I think is really starting to put together an all-around game. And I'm gonna go with him for the victory. And I think, Dave, I think with this win, he's maybe only 1 or 2 away from a title shot. It puts him very close to talking about getting a title shot, too.
Yeah. Depending on how dominant he is, it could be 1 or 2 fights away for sure. But I'm going to agree and go with Edson Barboza.
Unfortunately, I have to pick somebody here in this main event between Bigfoot Silva and Frank Mir. I guess I'll go Frank Mir. I don't know. I really don't have a reasoning. I'm just I'm Frank Mir.
Hey, this is my pick. My wife just got here.
I don't know. Is that McDonald's shake? Does that mean you're going Bigfoot? Because he's big? He would drink a shake? I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure what's happening. The wheels are falling off. No, I don't really care, to be honest, but I'll take Frank Mir.
All right. Any final thoughts here before we end the show?
Yep, couple. Dana White says Rory McDonald will fight Robbie Lawler for the UFC welterweight title on July 11th.
So I guess that's his reward for not failing a drug test.
Yep. UFC
so now we'll get Ben Henderson, Hector Lombard.
UFC says they will have every fighter tested in competition.
So there's not going to be no more out-of-competition test.
That I can't answer. Lorenzo Fertitta says the UFC will immediately advocate to all commissions to test every fighter on cards in competition.
Okay. Well, that to me means that the out-of-competition cocaine stuff won't happen again. That's basically what they're trying to avoid.
Yeah, the thing that I don't like is that this is the UFC's problem. This is not the Athletic Commission's problem. You know what I mean? This is the UFC,
right.
But they can't even fix their own problem. I don't like that. All they can do, they're like, we told the Illinois Athletic Commission that they have to test all these fighters. But if, say they go to Boise, Idaho, and that Athletic Commission is garbage, and they don't have the money to test, I mean, are all the people who are going to piss hot, are they all going to be on that card? You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
And here's a statistic for you. In 2013, 2014, the UFC hosted 79 events. Approximately 900 in-competition drug tests were administered, and out of the 1,800 occasions, approximately 900 in-competition drug tests were administered out of the 1,800 occasions UFC fighters entered the octagon. Out of those 900 tests, 10 fighters were positive for recreational drugs, which is 1.1% of the people. 12 fighters tested positive for PEDs, 1.3%. On 19 occasions, fighters were subjected to out-of-competition PED test. 5 tested positive. That's crazy, huh?
So those are combined numbers for 2013 and 2014.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's, at least in that seems a lot lower than what I guess you could say the news of other media is making it out to be.
Yeah. UFC will immediately advocate to every commission to test every fighter on a card on fight night. They'll pay for any extra cost if need be.
I think it's more, Dave, more so the names that have been popping, more so than the numbers of actual fighters.
Okay, here Ariel just tweeted this. UFC will now do comprehensive, out-of-competition, random PED testing for all fighters, effective July 1st.
Same thing as the Reebok deal. I think, right?
UFC will support 4-year ban for first-time offenders.
What? For a first-time offender?
I'm just reading the tweets.
All right, that's a little absurd.
I love the people. It's fun when the UFC has a media event because then everybody that you follow tweets the exact same thing.
Right. Well, like we said opening the show, they weren't just going to have a press conference to say questions or answer questions. They were going to say something meaningful, and something meaningful was going to come out. And a lot of policies we're discussing are coming out, and obviously the 4-year thing, if that's on a first offense, that's a little ridiculous. But it seems as though they're moving in the right direction. Them throwing out the actual numbers is good, so it's not as rampant. But at least they are addressing that, even though it's a low percentage, Dave, they still address that. It seems to be starting to spiral out of control, and they're addressing the issue, and I'm glad they're tackling it head on, and they're not denying that there isn't a problem.
Right. Let me throw a couple at you real quick. UFC announces this is Mike Chiappetta kind of surmising what's happened. UFC announces they'll institute year-round, out-of-competition PED testing through a third-party testing organization starting July 1. That's a good step, he says.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lorenzo is being quoted, UFC would support a VADA, or WADA, whatever you want to say, standard for a 4-year ban to a first-time offender. So that's where the 4 years, that's not a number that's a WADA thing, because they're the Olympic guys.
Right, but that seems very severe for a first-time offender. They said they would support it. That doesn't mean they're going to actually do it.
Okay.
But
see, if you go on, certain guys, they have like a slideshow that's going on, and they're putting these slides up. Listen to this, Jim. This is outrageous. In 2013, 2014, the UFC spent approximately $500,000 in testing expenses.
That doesn't seem like that much. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know how much tests cost, but that doesn't seem like that much money. Considering how many tests that you read off earlier that they ran.
Yeah, I did. This is crazy. Hey, I'm just happy that all UFC main and co-main eventers will be subject to enhanced out-of-competition drug testing as of July 1st.
So that means probably more things will be tested in their sample as opposed to a non-main event or co-main event fighter. Makes sense as well?
Yeah, that's exactly. I love how people are, like, there's always those media outlets that just kind of throw stuff out there. This guy says, will we see a spat of retirements come July?
We might. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, like I said, so far all we're hearing is good. I agree with it, except for that 4-year thing. That will have to be, I think, tweaked a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially when, like you said, let's throw just real quickly. We're trying to wrap up the show, but we mentioned earlier that Ashlee EvansSmith thing. She got popped for what was a dietary substance to help her kind of maintain her weight, and she's getting suspended 9 months. So under this new rule, if that same drug's still banned, let's say she's still using it again, not a performance-enhancing drug, right? And she gets popped. You're telling me then she's going to get suspended 4 years? You know what I mean? Like, that's very severe.
I agree.
So that's going to have to be adjusted.
The one thing that's going to be interesting, and not to open up a complete can of worms, but some hacks that are on Twitter keep reporting that Kat Zingano's pre-fight drug test isn't back yet, and that she may have failed it. What's going to be the punishment for somebody who fails a test before July 1st? Because
I guess, yeah. Well, I guess they're going to keep doing what they have been doing.
Right. You know, it'll be interesting because, shoot, if you're Rory McDonald, I mean, the enhanced testing starts July 1st. So, I mean, any of that stuff that you do before then, you can do it as long as you don't get caught. I don't know. I guess they can't just implement it tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, again, it works perfectly with the Reebok deal.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're going to wrap up the show here. We'll thank our friends at MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca, TopRatedMMA.com, MMASignaturesUSA.com, and, of course, our presenting sponsor of Fight Chicks. Thanks again for representing Beyond the Cage here. He is the Juice Dave Sadler. You can follow him on Twitter at VigilanteJuice. I am Jim Graham, your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And thanks again for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.